What happens when the family you love turns their back on you for someone else? Jessica thought she had everything figured out. She'd worked hard, made sacrifices, and stayed close to her family. But the moment her brother's fiancée stepped into their lives, everything began to change. Evelyn, with her wealth and power, made Jessica feel invisible, just as their parents did. When the wedding became more about her than their brother, Jessica had had enough. But would standing up for herself come at a cost? Stay tuned to find out how Jessica confronts the truth and whether she can still find family in a world that has turned against her. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. My name is Jessica, and my story began in a house brimming with love, though not all of it was equally shared. Growing up, our home was filled with the chaos of laughter, tears, and the pitter-patter of little feet. I was the second oldest, just a year younger than my brother Kevin, and had two younger sisters, Emily and Megan, who arrived when I was in my early teens. From a young age, I learned what responsibility meant. While other kids were outside playing, I was in our cramped kitchen helping Mom prepare dinner or taking care of Emily and Megan. It wasn't always easy, but it taught me the importance of kindness and hard work. Our parents, Dave and Donna, worked tirelessly. Dad spent long hours at the local factory, and Mom balanced part-time jobs while managing the house. We weren't wealthy, but we always had food on the table and a roof over our heads. Still, there was something that I couldn't ignore. Kevin always seemed to get special treatment from our parents. "Kevin's the oldest," Dad would say with pride, ruffling his hair. "He's carrying on the family name." As time passed, the differences became more obvious. When Kevin graduated high school, he got a car. When I graduated, I got a card and a promise to help with college. It wasn't that I wasn't loved, I was. But the favoritism was clear, and it shaped how things played out in our family. Emily and Megan looked up to me a lot, almost like I was their second mom. I took that role seriously, wanting to be the best example I could be for them. After finishing high school, I set my sights on college. As promised, my parents had saved some money for our education. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a solid start. I decided to study finance, hoping it would open doors to a steady career. The workload was exactly as I'd expected, with long nights in the library, but I faced each challenge head-on, driven by determination. Even though I had a lot of work to do, I always made time to help Mom around the house and call home. Mom would catch me up on the family news, Dad would offer a quick hello, and my sisters would argue over who would talk to me first. I didn't hear much directly from Kevin usually. Mom would fill me in. He had started working at a local company and wasn't interested in going back to school. Our parents, especially Dad, were proud of him. "Your brother's doing great in business," Dad would say in our rare conversations. "He has a talent for it." I'd agree, even though a little bit of competitiveness stirred in me. Still, I reminded myself that life wasn't a race and we each had our own paths to follow. Throughout the years, I stayed focused on my studies and part-time jobs, determined to make the most of the opportunity my parents had given me. Their financial support didn't cover everything, but it was a significant help, and I was truly grateful. I knew they were making sacrifices to keep me in school, and I didn't want to disappoint them. Before I knew it, graduation day arrived. As I stood in my cap and gown, holding my diploma, I searched the crowd for my family. There they were, Mom and Dad smiling proudly, Emily and Megan waving enthusiastically, and Kevin standing a bit to the side with a small smile. After the ceremony, Mom enveloped me in a tight hug, tears glistening in her eyes. "We're so proud of you, honey," she whispered. Dad patted my shoulder awkwardly but affectionately. "You've done well, Jessica. Now it's time to make your mark in the world." We celebrated with dinner, and I shared my plan to stay in the city and start my career. I had thought about moving back home, but the job opportunities in the city were too good to pass up. My new entry-level job at a financial firm meant long hours, so visits home were rare, usually limited to holidays or long weekends. Still, I kept in touch, calling often and sending care packages to my sisters. Everything changed about 8 years after I first left for college. I was at home visiting and sitting in the kitchen with Mom, chatting over coffee, when my phone rang. It was my boss. "Jessica, I have some news," he said, sounding more serious than usual. "We're opening a new branch in your hometown, and I want you to lead it. It's a big promotion, but you'd have to move." Are you interested? Without hesitation, I said, Yes, I'm definitely interested. When I got the job offer in my hometown, my company said they would pay for an apartment, but Mom and Dad insisted I move back home. Come on, Jessica, Mom said. It'll be just like old times. I couldn't say no. On my first day back, I walked into our old house, and it looked smaller than I remembered. Emily and Megan, now in their late teens, ran to hug me. Kevin was living on his own and was already engaged. Later that night, after I finished unpacking, I sat with Emily and Megan in our old room. It felt nice to be home, listening to their stories and laughing together. So, tell me about Kevin's fiancée, I said. Emily and Megan exchanged a glance. Her name's Evelyn, Emily said slowly. She's different. Megan nodded. Yeah, she's from a rich family. Her dad owns the company Kevin works for now. Something in the way they said it made me curious. Different how? I asked, but they just shrugged and changed the subject. I decided to let it go for now. The next few weeks were busy with my new job, setting up the branch office. It was hard work, but I enjoyed it. In the evenings, I helped Emily and Megan with their homework or chatted with Mom while she cooked dinner. One Monday, we were all sitting around the table when the doorbell rang. Mom jumped up to answer it. It's Kevin and Evelyn, she called out. I stood up, excited to see my brother and meet his fiancée. Kevin walked in first, looking every bit the part in a sharp suit. Behind him was Evelyn, tall and slender, with flawless hair and clothes that probably cost more than my entire rent. She swept her gaze around the house with a subtle sneer, as if the place wasn't fit for someone of her caliber. Oh, how quaint, she said dismissively, picking up one of Mom's knickknacks and inspecting it as though it were beneath her. I stood there, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach as I watched my parents fuss over her. They asked if she needed anything, apologized for the smallest inconveniences, practically bending over backward to accommodate her. Emily and Megan were quiet, their eyes glued to the floor when Evelyn made a snide remark about Megan's clothes. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled Emily aside, my voice low. What's going on? Why is everyone letting her act like this? Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping. Kevin works for her dad now. It's a big deal. Mom and Dad are scared if we upset her, Kevin might lose his job. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't the family I knew. We never let anyone treat us like this. We had never bowed to anyone, let alone let them walk all over us. Things only got worse during dinner. Evelyn started making snide remarks about my job and my clothes. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood up, my voice firm. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but in this house, we treat each other with respect. If you can't do that, maybe you should leave. The room froze. Evelyn's face twisted in anger, her mouth opening in a retort, but she just grabbed her purse and stormed out, Kevin trailing behind, looking torn and helpless. As soon as the door slammed behind them, Mom and Dad turned on me. Jessica, how could you? Mom cried, her voice high with distress. You know how important this is for Kevin. Dad, his disappointment clear, muttered, You need to control your temper. This could ruin everything for your brother. I was stunned, my blood running cold. They were mad at me? They begged me to apologize, to be the bigger person. Eventually, to get them off my back, I reluctantly agreed to try and make peace with Evelyn. The weeks sped by, and before long, Kevin's wedding was the only thing anyone could talk about. Evelyn took over everything, micromanaging every detail as though she were running a military operation, not planning a wedding. She dragged us through endless dress fittings, insisting we buy expensive gowns to match the venue's vision. When I suggested a less expensive option, she laughed. Oh, Jessica, she sneered. We can't have you looking cheap at my wedding, can we? Next came the bachelorette party. Evelyn handed out a detailed schedule, packed with mandatory activities and outfit changes. It was absurd, but Mom kept shooting me pleading looks, so I stayed quiet, swallowing my discomfort. Then came the big shock. Evelyn wanted us to perform a dance at the wedding, not just a casual dance, but a full-on choreographed performance. It'll be the highlight of the reception, she gushed, excitement practically oozing from her. You'll all look so cute. My stomach dropped. I had injured my back years ago in a car accident, and dancing wasn't something I could do anymore. But, I thought, how bad could it be? Well, it was pretty bad. I showed up at the dance studio, only to have the choreographer start talking about splits, lifts, and wild moves I hadn't even thought about. Evelyn was there, barking orders like a drill sergeant. "Come on, ladies, put your backs into it!" The words echoed in my head as my back screamed in protest. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was Evelyn's stage, and we were merely players, forced to perform for her satisfaction. I pulled out my phone, thinking I'd record the practice, but as I watched, I realized there was no way I could do this. It was way too much. "Hold on," I said. "This is crazy. We're not circus performers, Evelyn. I can't do these moves." Evelyn's face twisted with anger. "What do you mean you can't? Of course you can. Stop being difficult, Jessica." I stood my ground. "No, I mean it. I have an old back injury, and this kind of dancing isn't possible for me." That's when Evelyn really lost it. She started yelling and throwing around insults. Then she hit me with, "Fine, if you won't dance, you owe Kevin $15,000 as a wedding gift. It's only fair since you're ruining my special day." I was speechless. I looked at Emily and Megan, hoping they'd support me, but they just stared at the floor, clearly worried about what Mom had said earlier. That was it. I'd had enough. "You know what, Evelyn? Keep your stupid dance. I'm out of here." I stormed out of the studio, my hands shaking as I held my phone, which was still recording the whole mess. I walked home, my mind spinning. What was I going to do now? How did things get so messed up? I burst through the front door, still angry from the dance rehearsal disaster. Mom and Dad were in the living room, and they could tell something was wrong. I told them everything, the impossible dance routine, Evelyn's crazy behavior, and the $15,000 demand. I expected them to be on my side, maybe even upset for me, but I got something completely different. Dad's face turned red. "Jessica, how could you? After everything we've talked about, this wedding is important for Kevin's future. You need to apologize to Evelyn right now and agree to do the dance." I couldn't believe it. Apologize for what? Having a back injury? Standing up for myself? "Stop being so selfish," Dad shouted. "This isn't about you. It's about Kevin's happiness and success." "So, my happiness doesn't matter?" I shot back. "What about my health?" The argument got heated quickly. We were yelling and tears were shed, but I refused to give in to Evelyn's ridiculous demands. That's when Dad said something that stunned me. "If you can't support your brother and his fiancée, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The room went silent. That night, I packed a bag, ignoring Mom's weak attempts to calm things down. The next day, I moved into the apartment my company had offered me earlier. It was small and empty, but at least it was mine. The wedding came and went, but I didn't go. I couldn't stand the thought of watching my family cater to Evelyn's every whim. I spent that day alone in my apartment, torn between anger and sadness. A few days later, my phone blew up with notifications. Evelyn had posted on social media, sharing a dramatic story about how I had tried to ruin her perfect day. She made herself look like the victim and painted me as the jealous, spiteful sister-in-law. The comments were even worse. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly became experts on my life, calling me selfish and cruel. Even Emily and Megan liked the post, which hurt deeply. Soon, the calls started. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all telling me how disappointed they were and how ashamed I should be. Emily tried to reach out once, sending me a text saying she missed me, but when I suggested we meet up, she backed off, saying Evelyn wouldn't like it. I didn't try again after that. I threw myself into my work, hoping to finish my project and leave this town behind, but things kept getting delayed. Problems kept coming up that needed my attention, and each delay felt like a twist of the knife. Months passed, and I settled into a lonely routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I had almost gotten used to the quiet when my phone rang one night. It was Megan, and her voice was shaky. "Jessica, can we talk?" she asked. We met at a cafe far from anyone we knew. Megan looked awful. Dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. I'm so sorry, Jessica, she sobbed. You were right about everything. Slowly, she told me the whole story. After the wedding, Evelyn showed her true colors. She had been treating Emily and Megan like servants, making them clean her house, cook, and do laundry, all without any pay. She says it's our duty as family, Megan said bitterly. And Kevin, he just goes along with it. He sees how she treats us and says nothing. I was furious. What about Mom and Dad? They can't be okay with this. Megan gave a hollow laugh. They think it's great. They say we're building character and strengthening family bonds. It's like they're brainwashed. I couldn't believe it. This was worse than I had imagined. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you before, Megan whispered. I was scared. We all were. But I can't take it anymore. Please, Jessica, help us. The next day, I went straight to our parents' house. Mom opened the door, her smile fading when she saw me. Jessica, what are you doing here? She asked, but I pushed past her into the living room. Dad was there, reading the newspaper. He looked up with a frown. We need to talk, I said, about Evelyn and how she's treating Emily and Megan. Mom's face hardened. I don't know what Megan's been telling you, but… I cut her off. Don't deny it. I know everything. How can you let this happen? They're your daughters. Dad stood up, his voice cold now. You listen, Jessica. Evelyn is family. She's given Kevin opportunities we could only dream of. If the girls need to help out a bit, that's a small price to pay. I was stunned. A little help? She's treating them like slaves, and you're okay with that? Mom spoke up, her voice weak. You're exaggerating. The girls are fine. They're just… Just what, Mom? Just being abused by their sister-in-law while you look the other way? Dad's face turned red. That's enough. I won't have you coming in here and stirring up trouble. Evelyn is Kevin's wife. She's wealthy, and she can give this family a future. If you can't accept that, maybe you're not part of this family anymore. His words hit me like a punch. I stared at them, feeling like I didn't recognize them anymore. So, that's it? I said quietly. You're choosing money over your own children? Mom wouldn't look at me. Dad just glared. Get out, he said, his voice cold, and don't come back until you're ready to apologize to Evelyn and Kevin. I left, my legs shaky, my heart breaking all over again. As I walked away from the house that had once been my home, I was struck by a harsh truth. I couldn't change their minds. They were too blinded by the allure of money and status, but I couldn't leave Emily and Megan to suffer in silence. I had to find a way to help them, to save them from Evelyn, from my parents' refusal to see what was really happening, and from the life they seemed willing to accept. One day, I was preparing for an important meeting, reviewing my notes and adjusting my jacket, when I spotted a name on the guest list. James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries and Evelyn's father. My heart skipped a beat. He wouldn't recognize me. I hadn't gone to the wedding, but I knew him. He was the man whose money had torn my family apart. The meeting began with all the usual formalities, polite handshakes, fake smiles. James barely spared me a glance. We went over business, numbers, debating points as if we were strangers. Then, during the coffee break, I found myself next to him as we both refilled our cups. He made small talk, the kind that led to the most unexpected conversation. You know, he said with a pride that made my skin crawl. I raised Evelyn to be humble, never let her flaunt our wealth. She grew up modest, well-mannered, even married a regular guy. She respects everyone, treats them like family. Something inside me snapped. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and played a video I'd almost forgotten about. It was of Evelyn, her face red with rage, yelling at the dance rehearsal. You stupid scum, she screamed at the screen. Pay $15,000 or get out. I won't have you ruining my wedding. I watched as the color drained from James's face, his eyes glued to the screen. When it ended, the room fell into a heavy silence. I had no idea, James whispered, his voice faltering. She's always so polite around me. I thought I raised her right. I braced myself for his anger, for him to storm off in disgust, but instead, his eyes met mine, a look of desperation in them. Please, he pleaded, tell me everything. And so, I did. I told him about the cruel words, the way Evelyn made Emily and Megan work for her like servants, the way she'd poisoned my parents against me. With every word, I saw James age before my eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said when I finished, his voice breaking. "I failed as a father. Please, let me try to fix this." Before I could even reply, he stood up, his face set with determination. "Come with me now." We drove to Kevin and Evelyn's house in silence. James's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. The tension in the air was palpable. When we walked inside, the scene was even worse than I had imagined. Emily, dressed in a maid's uniform, was scrubbing the floor while Evelyn lounged on the couch, barking orders as if she were the queen of the house. That was it. James lost it. "Evelyn," he roared, his voice booming. "What is the meaning of this? How dare you treat people like this? Your own family!" Evelyn's shock quickly turned into anger. She pointed at Emily, her voice dripping with disdain. "I apologize to servants?" James's face turned purple with rage. "That's it! You're cut off! No more money, no more house! I'm ashamed to call you my daughter!" Kevin tried to step in. "Sir, please, the girls don't mind helping out. It's no big deal." But James turned on him. "And you, letting your wife treat your sisters like that? You're fired, both of you, out of my sight!" Then he looked at me and Emily, his voice softening. "I'm so sorry for everything. Please let me help fix this." As we left, Evelyn's angry screams fading behind us, I felt a mix of emotions, relief and vindication, but also a deep sadness. It didn't feel like a true victory. The fallout came quickly and with devastating force. Instead of seeing the truth, my parents doubled down on their support for Kevin and Evelyn. They were furious with me, blaming me for ruining Kevin's once easy life. "How could you do this to your own brother?" Mom cried over the phone. "He had everything and now it's all gone because of you." Dad's response was even colder. "You've always been jealous of Kevin," he snapped. "Well, congratulations, you've destroyed this family. Don't bother coming around anymore. You're not welcome." Their words cut deep, but I wasn't surprised. They had made their choice long ago, and it wasn't me or my sisters. I focused on finishing the project that had kept me in my hometown for so long. When it was finally done, I packed up my apartment and left without a second glance. I found a new job in another city, eager to start fresh. Months passed. I built a new life, made new friends, and did my best to forget the family that had turned their backs on me. But I couldn't stop worrying about Emily and Megan. I sent them texts, but their replies were short, distant. Then, one rainy night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Emily and Megan standing there, soaked to the bone, each of them holding a suitcase. "Jessica," Emily said, her voice shaky, "we need your help." Over cups of hot tea, they told me everything. Kevin and Evelyn, now broke and unemployed, had moved back in with our parents. But instead of being humbled by their circumstances, Evelyn had only grown more controlling. "She treats the house like it's her personal kingdom," Megan explained, her voice tight with frustration. "And us? We're just her servants. Mom and Dad do nothing." Emily added, "They're so afraid of Kevin leaving that they let Evelyn do whatever she wants." My heart shattered for them. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" They both looked guilty, eyes cast downward. "We were ashamed," Megan admitted quietly, "and scared. Evelyn threatened to make things worse if we contacted you. But we couldn't take it anymore." Emily looked up, her eyes pleading. "Please, Jessica, can we stay with you? Just until we find jobs and a place of our own." I didn't hesitate for a second. "Of course you can stay, as long as you need." It wasn't easy at first. My apartment was small, and we all had to adjust to living together as adults. But over time, we found our rhythm, starting to rebuild our lives piece by piece. I helped them with their resumes and practiced interview questions with them. We stayed up late, talking through all the years of hurt and misunderstandings. Weeks turned into months. Emily landed a job at a local bookstore, and Megan enrolled in classes at a nearby community college. They insisted on helping with rent and groceries, though I told them it wasn't necessary. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table laughing at a silly story, I realized something important. Our parents might never change, and Kevin and Evelyn might remain the same, but that was okay. We had each other, and that was enough. Looking at my sisters strong, resilient, and finally free to be themselves, I knew we were going to be okay. Whatever came next, we'd face it together, like a real family should. What do you do when the family you've always tried to protect and support chooses to stand with the people who have mistreated you? When the very people you've sacrificed for turn their backs on you because they're afraid of losing the perfect life they've built? Jessica spent years trying to make sense of the favoritism, the dismissive comments, and the endless sacrifices she made for her family. From doing everything for her sisters to working hard to build a career, she kept giving, hoping that one day her family would see her for who she was. But when the time came to stand up to Evelyn, Jessica realized that her family was more loyal to their status than to her. When Evelyn demanded the impossible and her parents sided with her, it was the final straw. Jessica stood firm, walking away from a family that had never truly had her back. But in the end, Jessica's strength and self-respect became her saving grace. She didn't need them. She found a new family in the sisters who finally saw her as she saw them. They may have lost their family, but they had gained something far more valuable: each other. So, what would you do? Would you continue to sacrifice for a family that doesn't respect you? Or would you finally choose yourself and walk away? Let's discuss in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.